Yeah, that's another challenge that's today is that a lot of personal accountability and responsibility is lacking in a lot of areas, and
Absolutely it is.
that that presents a challenge because yeah, like you're making me angry, right? No, if you have personal responsibility, and there's books like Radical Responsibility and stuff that really attack this
Exactly.
subject because of the fact that no, you're responsible for yourself. If not, you're ceding control to somebody or something else for your life, your thoughts, your all this stuff. And who would want to do that? But most people don't think of it in that way, right? And that's the disconnect.
Yeah, but
So
they don't. I mean, I don't know if you could have said it better or anybody could have. You're exactly right, and it is that ceding control. And at times when I'm talking with clients or people, I share with them this fairly simplistic way that Patrick Kilcar looks at the world. And granted, it is simplistic. However, it kind of makes sense to me in that this one container or bucket, what can I control in this world? Literally. And after you sift through it, you shake it out, it's only one thing. It's us. I can only control Patrick. But then the second bucket or container is what can I influence? And that one is much deeper, much bigger.
right.
However, what I see in my, in my privileged seat as a therapist or clinician, I see most people spending their time in the third bucket. The third bucket is what we can't control and what we cannot influence. We keep doing it over and over and over, expecting different results, and it doesn't happen. And so it's getting back into, okay, this isn't getting you where you want to go. What do you really want to achieve? Because this isn't it.
Well, do you think part of that comes from, and I didn't think we get this level, but I think it's true. Is there? I think a lot of people don't want to deal with taking the responsibility or
Absolutely.
being able to, take control because they don't want that responsibility, right? And so subconsciously, they almost like they don't want to focus on the things they can control. They don't want to do that stuff because it means that they have to rise a level and have another level of like that accountability and everything in their lives that they just aren't maybe or subconsciously do not want to take on or be. But that's where the magic happens, if you're willing to do that, right? And that's like when you look at entrepreneurs, I think that's something that successful entrepreneurs do really, really well, is that they recognize these areas where they know what they need to do, but aren't doing it. And they finally, say, you know what? All right, I'm going to do it. And they do it and they level up and they do that way because they confront those things. Right. It's funny. You probably see this too, is a lot of times people talk about gratitude and forgiving people throughout their lives or situations or things that have happened that impact them that is still like an albatross around their neck holding them back. But the biggest thing that people most of the time need to forgive, or the number one thing they need to forgive, is themselves. And they're not willing to do that in a lot of ways too, right? So I'll let you riff on all of that, but there's a lot there.
No, it's a huge amount. And if you look at the book, the emotional intelligence book, and you go back, I don't remember what podcast it was for you. I think it was fairly recent, but The Ordinary to the Extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And when you look at this book, people may think, oh, these are really extraordinary people. Well, their actions are extraordinary, but they're no more extraordinary than you or me or anybody on the planet. We're ordinary people. We survive in very similar ways. We look at the world through a very specific prism, which generally meets out reality. And the piece, though, is that we get into this space or this place of just not being fully honest with who we are in the world. And it's exactly what you're saying. When people come in and see me, the level of change that they're being invited to do can be absolutely overwhelming. I've had a number of people through the years, after the first visit, at the end of the visit, say to me, listen, I really appreciate this time. and I appreciate what we've talked about. I can't do this, or I can't do this now. It's just too much. And when you look at the stories in this book and how it talks about these 15 competencies in terms of who we are, that kind of transformation, it's in reach for all of us. And, you know, a month and a half ago, I did an EQI feedback session with the CEO here in Washington. And your listeners can't really see this, but there are these 15 competencies that I alluded to earlier. And when somebody looks at the results of the EQI, this one particular page, it's color coded, and where do our vision will immediately take us to the lowest score. That's because that's what we did in school. And to look at the lowest score and then begin to decide, well, how real is that? Does this really represent that particular piece of who I am in the world? And so understanding the lower parts of what goes on with us from an emotional intelligence standpoint is important. But also, there are times where it can be too high. And I'll give you an example. If you looked at the assertiveness competency, and let's say you're looking at it, and from 1 to 25, it's around a 60, which is in the lower end, right? We all kind of know what that looks like. I mean, we know what that represents in our life if we're not terribly assertive. The piece, though, that if it's, say, 120, and it's glaringly higher than maybe the others, you go from being more subservient, kind of feeling more like a human doormat, to being in a place of being enormously aggressive. So you're not assertive anymore, you're aggressive. And then imagine if kind of hanging down from the ceiling were a mobile with 15 different parts. And you're looking at it, or like the little mobile that would hang over Hannah as she's, moving out of the baby stage to the toddler stage. Yeah. But if you go and you touch one of those pieces, Dave, just one, boop, what happens?
It starts to move things. They all start to
everything
impact
starts
each other.
To move.
It's like a ripple effect.
Yes, completely. That's the perfect way to describe it. And the shift is that if I take responsibility for being aggressive in the world, and I look at it, the other pieces connected to it, which are the other 14, begin to shift and change as well. And so it's, the CEO had 4 of the 15 competencies that were just glaring to me, just popped out. The first was emotional self-awareness was really pretty high, appropriate, like 105, pretty good.
Okay.
But then below that was emotional self-expression, which was exceedingly low. So here's a guy, CEO, who has all these feelings and rarely ever, if ever, expresses them. So it just stays with him.